My name is Margaret, 23 years old, and I recently graduated with honors in technology engineering from a university in Massachusetts. On my graduation day, no one from my family attended. No flowers, no congratulations, not even a proud glance. Just a text from my mother. Your father says that since you chose your own path, you should take full responsibility for it. That evening, I returned home, standing in the middle of the vast mansion I once called home, a cold space where everything gleamed under crystal chandeliers but held not a trace of warmth. My father stood at the top of the staircase, his gray suit crisply pressed, holding a glass of red wine that I knew he never actually drank, just for show. "So you're really turning down the position at the company?" he asked, his tone flat, as if he were reading the morning paper. "Yes, I don't want to work in finance. I want to pursue energy engineering research," I replied, keeping my voice steady. His eyes were cold as stone. "Engineering?" He pronounced each syllable as if I had just declared I wanted to become a magician. "Aren't you ashamed of betraying the family tradition? From your grandfather to me, the entire Preston lineage has thrived on finance. Investing is in our blood. And you? You want to be an engineer? Some mechanic assembling machines." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I want to create something with real value. I don't want to just shift money from one account to another." He scoffed, his laughter echoing in the luxurious but empty space. Then, as if he had been waiting for this moment, he reached into his suit pocket, pulled out a wad of small bills, and tossed them onto the marble floor right at my feet. "Here, $200. That's all someone like you is worth. No more trust fund, no more Preston name. Nothing." I watched the bills flutter to the ground like dry autumn leaves, cold, weightless, and devoid of emotion. It wasn't the money itself that hurt. It was the way he threw it, as if I were nothing more than a failed product being discarded. My mother stood a few steps away, holding her second cocktail of the afternoon. She said nothing, just looked at me with an expression that was both cold and pitying. No defense, no "I'll talk to your father," just silence. So long and heavy that it ached. I bent down, picked up the bills, placed them in my wallet, then stood up, my eyes never leaving my father's. "Thank you, Father," I said slowly. "I will turn this $200 into something greater than you ever imagined." He flicked his hand toward the door, signaling the end of the performance in which he had played director. "Get out of my house. You're no longer a Preston." I pulled my only suitcase through the door without looking back. The heavy oak door closed behind me with a deep thud, marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of something entirely new. I stepped down the stone staircase, where the car I had used during college was no longer there. It had been repossessed, as it was registered under the company's name. I had no home, no car, not a single bank card in my pocket. But I had my old laptop, a few engineering schematics on my hard drive, and an idea. An idea that I believed could change the way the world stored and used energy. I lifted my head to the Boston night sky, the wind tousling my hair, making me shiver slightly. $200 in my wallet, a dream in my heart, and nothing left to lose. That was the moment I knew. I was free. I boarded the last night bus out of Boston at 11:20 p.m., my destination, San Jose, the beating heart of America's tech industry. The journey lasted over 70 hours, during which I barely ate anything except a few crackers and a small water bottle that a kind passenger gave me. The night's cold seeped through my thin coat, but it wasn't as chilling as the feeling of being disowned by my family. When I stepped off the bus in San Jose, I had less than $120 left after paying for the ticket and travel expenses. I had no contacts here, no place to go. I dragged my suitcase out of the station, found a nearby park, and sat down on a wooden bench under a large oak tree. That night, I slept with my laptop as a pillow and an old scarf draped over me. I thought I would cry, that I would curse life, but I didn't. I only felt calm. Maybe because, for the first time, I had nothing left to lose. The next morning, I bought a sandwich and a small black coffee from a convenience store nearby, $7 in total. While sitting on a stone bench eating, I opened my old laptop and typed 3 lines on the first page of my digital notebook. I will never use the Preston name to achieve anything in life. I will create something that changes how the world uses energy. When I return, it will be on my own terms. I owe them nothing. After writing, I closed my laptop and looked up at the buildings in the distance, glowing under the rising sun. They seemed to whisper, telling me to start. But how do you begin when you don't even know what the first step is? I spent the entire day wandering through downtown San Jose's office districts, looking for part-time work, any job that would help me survive a few days. Everyone turned me down. No experience. Not hiring. We're downsizing. I heard the same lines so many times that they blurred together. By late afternoon, I sat down at a small cafe called Rust and Bean. While nursing a $2 iced tea to make use of the Wi-Fi for job applications, I noticed a middle-aged man struggling to fix a coffee machine that was making a strange noise. Maybe it was my engineer's instincts kicking in, but I stood up and asked, softly, "Do you need help?" I studied electrical mechanical engineering. At first, he hesitated, but after I pointed out that the strange hissing sound was caused by a misaligned pressure valve, he reluctantly let me try. 10 minutes later, the machine was running smoothly again. He looked at me, surprised. "How did you do that?" "I read the schematic and listened." I smiled. The man, Chuck, was the cafe owner. He not only let me sleep in the storage room upstairs, but also offered me a job as a maintenance assistant. Low pay, but enough to keep me afloat. I accepted immediately. The following days became a cycle of early mornings cleaning machines and checking equipment, and late nights refining my designs for a renewable energy storage project I had conceived back in my sophomore year of college. The technology was still unfinished, but I knew that if I could perfect it, it could revolutionize the way people stored solar energy. Something that was becoming more common, but still limited by current battery efficiency. One evening, while redrawing the core design, Maya, the cafe's only waitress, walked in. She glanced at my sketches and asked, "What are you working on? Looks like a treasure map." I laughed, flipping the page over to explain in the simplest terms. She listened intently, then suddenly said, "So if you make this work, electricity will be cheaper and more sustainable?" "Not just cheaper, safer, cleaner, and more adaptable. It could help remote areas become self-sufficient without relying on national grids." Maya didn't fully understand, but her smile made me feel that what I was pursuing wasn't just ambition. It was something that truly mattered. That night, I opened my laptop and created a new folder, naming it Aurora, the name for my battery project. I knew countless long nights and failures lay ahead. But I also knew one thing. I had started, and I wasn't going to stop. Not to prove anything to anyone, but because, for the first time, I was living for myself. "Excuse me," I asked gently, "is that the power distribution model for a multi-layer energy charging system?" The man looked up, surprised. "You know about this?" "I'm conducting research on energy storage systems. There are a few points in your schematic that could be optimized if you reduce the intermediary layers here." I pointed to a section of the diagram. He studied me intently, as if evaluating me. Then he smiled. "I'm Neil, lead engineer at Solenoid Tech. We're stuck on the problem of heat dissipation and power distribution in fluctuating pressure environments. If you truly understand what you just said, you might be able to help us." I didn't answer right away. My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice steady. "Show me the real-time simulation data, and I'll try proposing an improvement." That evening, Neil and I stayed at the cafe until Maya turned off all the lights and kicked us both out. We continued talking just outside, sitting on the cafe steps. He handed me a business card. "Meet me on Monday. If what you're saying is right, I'll introduce you to someone you need to meet." I took the card, the yellow streetlight casting a glow on the words, Solenoid Tech, David Neal, lead engineer. I knew I had just stepped up to the first door. I didn't know what lay beyond it yet, but that feeling, the feeling of being recognized for my ability, not my name, kept me awake that night. I arrived at the Solenoid Tech office on Monday morning with my old laptop, a stack of notes, and a dream folded inside my bag. The office was on the 4th floor of an old building. No flashy signs, no grand reception hall, just an open space filled with wires, components, and whiteboards covered in formulas. David Neal, the lead engineer, was holding a cup of coffee when I walked in. He gestured toward an empty desk. "You have 15 minutes. Impress me." I presented a solution for handling thermal oscillations by integrating a micropressure neutralization chamber, a technique I had independently researched during college but had never seen applied commercially. I backed it up with a simulated model and explained why their current approach was causing up to 17% efficiency loss in the system. David was silent for a long moment, then set his coffee down and nodded slowly. "I think you need to meet someone." A few days later, he took me to a research facility at the Santa Clara Institute of Technology, a private center collaborating on energy technology research. The person I was introduced to was Professor Monica Tran, an expert in applied electrochemistry and one of the pioneers in solid-state battery research in California. Monica wasn't easily impressed. The first meeting lasted nearly 4 hours, filled with sharp, scalpel-like questions. How do you ensure there's no energy dissipation in the distribution layer? Will the molecular structure in your simulation remain stable under triple the temperature fluctuation? Why use a biothermal conductive compound instead of industrial ceramics? I answered every question with everything I knew and everything I had learned on my own, from my university days to the late nights at Rust and Bean Cafe. When the session ended, Monica nodded at David. "Put her in the temporary research group. I want real-world testing within a month. If she's right, I'll grant her access to the Stanford Innovation Hub Energy Lab." I couldn't believe my ears. From a girl sleeping in a storage room, I was about to step into one of the top energy research facilities in the US, a place I had only dreamed of as a freshman. But I knew one thing. Every opportunity comes with high expectations. Failure was not an option. The 1-month trial in the research group was the most grueling period I had ever experienced. I worked morning shifts at the cafe, spent afternoons and evenings in the research team, then stayed up until 2 a.m. refining my models on my laptop. I learned how to measure intramolecular resistance with high-precision equipment, familiarize myself with nanocomposite materials, and simulate electromagnetic environments under extreme conditions. By the 4th week, I presented the first prototype of the Aurora design, a version ready for practical testing. Monica and 2 technical assistants spent an entire afternoon verifying the data. In the end, Monica simply said, "There's potential." 3 days later, I received an email. "Stanford Lab officially grants access to Margaret Preston. Project code, Aurora Beta." I stared at the words on the screen, my hands trembling. No one in the room knew that they had just opened a door for me, a door I had never been sure I would ever reach. The next few months were an endless journey forward. I moved out of the storage room and rented a small place near Stanford thanks to a research grant Monica helped me secure. I spent almost all my time in the lab, wearing a white coat, protective glasses, working with materials I had only read about in textbooks. By day, I ran experiments. By night, I wrote reports, redrew schematics, and optimized every single detail. There were nights when I collapsed asleep on my desk, waking up with tangled hair and a sore wrist. But not once did I feel exhausted in a way that made me want to quit. If anything, I felt alive, for the first time in a long time. Then, one October night, while testing the 3rd-generation Aurora prototype, the data displayed something no one had dared to hope for: a storage efficiency of 98.4%, a number never recorded before. I reran the test 3 times, using independent measuring devices, checking every circuit, every molecular layer. The result did not change. I sank into my chair, unable to believe my own eyes. A part of me wanted to scream. A part of me was afraid to breathe too hard, as if touching it too quickly would make it disappear. I sent the data to Monica with a short message. Breakthrough confirmed. Aurora is alive. 10 minutes later, she called. Margaret, do you realize what you've just done? I simply replied, I just rewrote a new chapter in energy storage. On the other end, Monica was silent for a moment, then exhaled. We need to prepare a presentation for the International Energy Conference next month. You will be the one presenting. I looked at the Aurora Project logo on my laptop screen, a soft, swirling light representing energy that never fades. I had promised myself I would create something that changes the world. And now, I had just touched it. The International Energy Conference that year was held in Seattle. I stood on stage, bright lights shining directly on my face, while hundreds of scientists, investors, and global energy executives sat in the audience. When I presented Aurora, the first high-efficiency storage system reaching nearly 98.5% performance at one-third the cost of traditional lithium batteries, the hall fell completely silent. When I finished with, if renewable energy is the future, then Aurora is the key to unlocking it, the applause was thunderous. Some people stood. Monica sat in the front row, eyes glistening, while David squeezed my hand backstage, whispering, We're ready. Within 2 weeks after the conference, I received over 20 investment offers. One name stood out. Avery Capital, a venture capital firm in Austin, Texas, known for turning breakthrough tech ideas into billion-dollar empires. The invitation came from Raphael Lin, the firm's strategy director, a calm, sharp-eyed man who seemed to read thoughts. Our meeting took place in a small Mexican restaurant near the research facility. Raphael didn't waste time. I've been following you since Aurora was just a scribbled idea. Now it's a breakthrough. I want to invest $5 million for 22% equity in the company you're about to build. I gripped my glass, not answering immediately. Raphael took a sip of coffee and continued, as if reading my hesitation. Margaret, you don't need more people to dream with you. You need people who can turn that dream into reality, faster than anyone else out there. I was silent for a few seconds, then reached out my hand. We have a deal. Aurora Dynamics was founded the following spring, headquartered in San Mateo, inside a technology hub near the international airport. I was no longer the engineer sleeping on park benches or curled up in a cafe storage room. Now, I was the CEO, leading a team of over 30 people, including Maya, now the Chief Operating Officer, and David, Senior Technical Advisor. The first few months were a whirlwind, optimizing the supply chain, building the prototype production line, securing the first module manufacturing contracts, handling hundreds of legal documents. Each passing day, I felt both invigorated and constantly challenged. But not for a single moment did I feel lost. 1 year after receiving the initial investment, the first commercial version of Aurora Core was officially launched. Compact, sustainable, costing only half the price of lithium-ion batteries, yet lasting 3 times longer. In just 3 months, Aurora signed 17 supply contracts with solar energy companies across the U.S., from Arizona to Florida. The press called us the disruptor of the renewable energy game. I will never forget the first time I saw my product installed on the roof of a farm in New Mexico. Amidst dry fields where people once relied on old diesel generators for power. The farm owner, an elderly woman named Clara, took my hand and said, You've brought light here. Not just electricity, but hope. I couldn't hold back my tears. 3 years after Raphael signed the first check, Aurora Dynamics went public on NASDAQ. On the first day, the stock price doubled. By the end of the week, the company's valuation surpassed $720 million. My shares, after multiple investment rounds, were worth approximately $112 million. I still remember the feeling of watching the Bloomberg ticker display the news. Aurora Dynamics, the young woman who sparked a revolution. But I didn't celebrate with champagne or lavish parties. Instead, I returned to my office, opened my old laptop, the same one I once used as a pillow while sleeping in the park, and pulled up the first file I had ever written. I reread each of the 3 promises I had made to myself, my hands trembling. But this time, from happiness. I did not use the Preston name. I created something that truly changed how people use energy. And I returned not to beg or seek validation, but as someone who had broken through every limit on my own. Yet deep down, I knew there was still one thing left unfinished. I had not returned to the place that cast me out. The house where I was once thrown $200, as if that was all I was worth. And this time, I wasn't coming back for revenge. I was coming back to prove that light always finds its way home. I never thought that day would come so soon. At the end of Q2, a headline on CNBC caught the attention of the entire Aurora Dynamics team. Preston Equity, the long-standing Boston investment firm, faces takeover risk after consecutive quarters of losses. I stared at the name on the screen. I didn't need to read the full report. Preston Equity was the company my father, Edward Preston, had built and run for 3 decades. The same company he had once expected me to join as part of the family tradition, before tossing me $200 and cutting me off. The news reported that the company was in turmoil, outdated investment portfolios, sluggish response to emerging technologies, and a mass exodus of partners. Worse still, they were facing a quiet acquisition attempt from a tech conglomerate called Equinox Holdings, a name that had never publicly appeared in the market but was clearly backed by substantial financial power. I pressed my lips together and turned to Raphael, who stood beside me. His eyes told me he already knew what I was thinking. "It's us, isn't it?" I asked quietly. Raphael nodded. Equinox is the subsidiary we established last year to acquire legacy assets that need transformation. Preston Equity is one of our targets. So far, no one inside the company knows who truly owns it. I leaned back in my chair, my mind swirling. I had spent my entire youth living under the heavy shadow of the Preston name. A family bound to wealth and power, but devoid of understanding or love. And now, in a cruel twist of fate, I was the one holding the power to decide the future of the very empire my father once used to disown me. 1 week later, I arrived in Boston. The Preston Equity office building hadn't changed. Cold gray granite walls, heavy dark wood doors, and the gold-lettered Preston and Partners sign hanging proudly above the entrance. But this time, I wasn't entering as a cast-out daughter. I was the CEO of Aurora Dynamics, and the majority stakeholder of Equinox Holdings, the company now controlling 48% of Preston Equity. The man who greeted me was Warren Stokes, the firm's vice chairman, an old, cautious, and discreet man. "This way, miss. Mr. Preston is in a board meeting. He didn't recognize me." I nodded and walked down the familiar hallway, lined with the same oil paintings I had seen throughout my childhood. The 10th floor conference room, once off limits to me, was now where I sat at the head of the table, a folder of documents placed before me. I waited. The door swung open. My father walked in. His hair was grayer, his stance less firm than before. His eyes swept past me, not recognizing me at first. He began speaking in the same commanding tone that had once silenced rooms full of executives. "Ladies and gentlemen, we need to have a serious discussion about the threat from Equinox Holdings." "No need to worry, Father," I interrupted, lifting my gaze. The room fell completely silent. His eyes finally landed on me, and for the first time, he recognized me. "Margaret." I nodded and smiled, calm. "Hello, Father. It's been a long time." One of the board members stammered. You're behind Equinox?" I opened the folder and slid it toward my father. "Equinox Holdings is a subsidiary of Aurora Dynamics, and I am the one who authorized the takeover." My father froze, his eyes locked on the documents. His hand trembled slightly. "Why?" His voice was hoarse, no longer the sharp tone I once feared. I answered slowly, deliberately. "Because you once taught me that a person's worth is defined by what they can create. Today I return to prove You were right. Just not in the way you expected. Warren Stokes interjected. Ms. Margaret, what do you want from this deal? I looked him straight in the eye. I don't want to destroy Preston Equity. I want to save it. But to do that, I need to change everything, from its business model and personnel to its investment strategy. The company will be merged into Aurora's green technology ecosystem. The Preston name will be no more. My father gripped the armrest of his chair tightly. You're willing to bury an entire legacy just for your pride? I stood up, my voice calm but firm. Not for pride. For the future. I left the boardroom, silence trailing behind me. As I stepped into the elevator, I heard my father call out, Margaret! I didn't turn back. Less than 2 hours after the board meeting, I sat in Equinox Holdings' temporary office, the 19th floor of a sleek glass building just 3 blocks from Preston Equity's headquarters. 2 phones rang non-stop on my desk, dozens of emails awaited responses, and a live financial transaction dashboard flashed constantly with numbers. I had no time for hesitation. By that afternoon, my legal team sent an official proposal to the entire Preston Equity board, a full merger into Aurora's ecosystem, complete rebranding, executive restructuring, and the complete removal of the Preston family's management rights. Attached was a warning. If the board failed to accept within 24 hours, Equinox would activate a pre-planned financial clause, calling in the debts Preston Equity owed to satellite investment branches that I had, quietly, taken control of over the past year. The exit door had been locked. That evening, I received a call from Warren Stokes. Margaret. His voice was low. Edward is rallying his remaining loyalists to block your proposal, but with the current share distribution, he can't stop the process if you move forward. I replied evenly. I didn't come to ask for permission. I came to finish this. The next morning at exactly 8 a.m., Preston Equity's board convened an emergency meeting. I wasn't there in person, but my legal team, representing Equinox Holdings, presented every merger clause in language that left no room for interpretation. When they reached the proposal to rename the company Aurora Capital, Warren glanced around the table, then quietly nodded. A board member raised a hand. Who will lead after the merger? My attorney replied smoothly. The current board will be dissolved. The new executive structure will be appointed by Aurora Dynamics, effective tomorrow. A heavy silence filled the room. Then a voice broke through, dry, firm, and familiar. No, I don't accept this. My father stood up, tapping his hand lightly against the ebony wood table. His gaze still carried the authority it once held, despite his hair now nearly all gray. You think you can erase 40 years of legacy with just a few signatures? Have you all forgotten that this institution built the Northeast investment sector? That the Preston name once stood for credibility and tradition? I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Every eye in the room turned toward me. Precisely because the Preston name once carried such weight? I spoke slowly. It must end at the right moment. Before it becomes a symbol of stagnation and outdated thinking. My father turned toward me. For a brief moment, I saw shock flicker across his face. You don't have to do this, Margaret. I walked to the table and placed the finalized proposal before him. I'm not doing this for revenge, I said, my voice steady. I'm doing this to fix what you let wither away in complacency. His fists clenched. You would erase everything, just to prove yourself? I shook my head. I've already proven myself. Without Preston, without an inheritance. Only with an idea you once called foolish and the $200 you threw on the floor. Every board member remained silent. Warren was the first to sign the proposal. Then, one by one, the others followed. Slowly but decisively, like dominoes falling in an unbroken sequence. In the end, only my father remained. The founder, the man who once believed he would be immortal on his throne of financial power. I slid the pen toward him. I'm not forcing you to sign. But if you don't, the shareholders will vote, and the decision will still be executed. He looked at me, his gaze filled with both regret and resignation. Then, he signed. The final contract was sealed at 5:48 p.m. Preston Equity, a name once tied to the very bloodline of a family, officially became part of Aurora Capital under my leadership. As I walked out of the building, the Boston sky burned red, as if flaring one last time to bid farewell to an era. I didn't feel victorious, nor did I feel resentful. There was only a strange sense of closure, as if I had finally shut a chapter I had been afraid to open for years. My father stood at the doorway, watching. He didn't call my name again. After the merger, I spent nearly 8 months completely restructuring Preston Equity now Aurora Capital. Outdated, bloated investment portfolios were replaced with clean technology projects, renewable energy, and sustainable infrastructure. We expanded into multi-layered energy storage, green agriculture, and smart urban redevelopment. Under new leadership, the company was no longer a symbol of the past, but a driving force of innovation. I kept none of the old executives, not out of revenge, but because to build the future, we cannot anchor ourselves to what once held us back. My father, Edward Preston, quietly stepped away. He no longer appeared in the media or attended industry events. He moved to the lake house that once served as our summer retreat. A quiet place, far from the city, from the headlines, from the spotlight that had once defined his life. My mother sent me a handwritten letter after the deal was finalized. She wrote that she had been following every step I took, from the first article that mentioned Margaret Preston, the golden girl of renewable energy, to the day I officially took control of the company that bore our family's name. She said she was proud, that she had been wrong to stay silent all those years, that she wanted to see me. I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, but because I had learned that some distances cannot be bridged by a few late apologies. 1 year passed since the day I walked out of that boardroom with a historic contract. I continued to lead Aurora Dynamics, expanding into Europe and Southeast Asia. The second-generation Aurora Core project, smaller, cheaper, more powerful, had just been granted global patents. One early winter morning, Maya, now the chief operating officer at headquarters, walked into my office, holding a light brown envelope. "You got something in the mail," she said, placing it on my desk. I opened it. Inside was another smaller white envelope with no sender's name. When I pulled it out, my heart clenched slightly. A folded piece of paper. And tucked inside were 2 old $100 bills carefully pressed flat. Beneath them, in a firm but slightly slanted handwriting, was a single line. "You are worth more than I ever knew. Edward." I sat in silence for a long time, not because of the money itself, but because, for the first time in 24 years, my father admitted his mistake in the only language I had ever understood from him. Action. That afternoon, I left work early and drove back to the old district, to a small cafe called Rust and Bean, the place where it all began. The cafe was unchanged, faded wooden doors, a blackboard menu written in chalk, and the familiar scent of roasted coffee drifting through old brick walls. Chuck, the old owner, had retired, passing the cafe down to his daughter. But the coffee machine I once fixed years ago was still there, still running, perfectly. I sat down by the window seat, the same spot where I had first sketched the Aurora design on my worn-out laptop screen. Ordering a cappuccino and a croissant, I pulled the envelope from my wallet, took out the 2 old bills, placed them on the table, and wrote on a napkin. This was my starting point, keep it, to remember that great things can begin in the humblest of places. I handed it to the waitress with a smile. "Please give this to the owner. It's a tip." Then, I walked out of the cafe, the golden hues of the setting sun casting a warm glow behind me. I had once left home with a small suitcase, a laptop, and $200 thrown at my feet. I returned with a company worth hundreds of millions, thousands of employees, and a mission greater than myself. But my true worth wasn't measured in those numbers. What I had learned was this. A person's value is not defined by where they were born, not by the name they carry, but by what they choose to build with what they have. And sometimes, something as small as 2 dismissed banknotes can be the beginning of an empire. From a rejected girl with $200 and a dream deemed foolish, I built an empire that changed the way the world uses energy. But this journey was never about proving my worth to others. It was about proving to myself that where we start does not determine where we end. What matters is that we dare to begin, dare to persist, and dare to create. I did not become who I am despite my past. I became who I am because of it. And now I live as myself, not seeking validation, only ensuring that I have no regrets. I stood in the corner of the riverfront hotel ballroom, the crystal chandeliers above reflecting every shimmering drop of champagne in my glass. In the center of the room, my sister, Madison, spun gracefully in her snow-white wedding gown, which cost $12,000. The entire hall was filled with laughter, chatter, and clinking glasses that felt as hollow as the smiles around me. Only I stood silent, watching the bank debt figures dance in my head like a waking nightmare. Madison was always the family's princess, and me, I was Lily, 35, an auditor, living by the book, never the center of attention, never really needed, unless there was a mess to clean up. And this time, the mess was a $55,000 loan Madison had tearfully begged me to co-sign. According to her, this dream wedding in Boston simply couldn't happen without a castle venue, imported orchids, or an A-list live band. All those luxuries required money. Money she didn't have. I remembered that fateful afternoon vividly, when Madison, mascara streaked down her face, collapsed in front of my office door. "Lily, you're the only one. Only you can help me." She sobbed, as if her world was collapsing. I gave her a tired, bitter smile. "You're drowning in credit card debt, your husband's startup doesn't even have a tax ID yet, and you want to borrow over 50 grand for what you call the most important day of your life? Wake up, Madison." But Madison didn't back down. And like a worn-out play I knew by heart, my parents jumped in. My mom pulled me into the living room, setting out warm apple pie, her voice dripping with sugar. "You know your sister has dreamed of the perfect wedding since she was a little girl, Lily. Haven't you always been the one to sacrifice for the family? This is no different." Dad puffed on his cigar, flipping through the sports section, lazily chiming in. "Madison will pay back every penny, Lily. She's a woman of her word. Don't make things difficult over a few numbers." I let out a loud, hollow laugh that echoed through the house full of old, worn-out memories. When has she ever kept her word? Like when she borrowed money to open that bakery and abandoned it for a yoga retreat in California. Or when she forgot to pay her rent and I had to cover for her. Mom flushed, her voice turning sharp. "You're so selfish, Lily. Your sister has dreams, ambition, while you only see ledgers and invoices." Gripping my glass tightly, I swallowed the anger burning in my throat. I knew this game too well. Emotional blackmail dressed up as family love, pushing me into the role of the cold-hearted sister, ruining Madison's fantasy. In the end, I signed, not for Madison, not for my parents. I signed because this time I had clauses they wouldn't see coming. 3 days later, I sat in my small New Haven apartment, the glow of my laptop screen reflecting off the glass of red wine beside me. Genesis, my best friend and attorney, sat across from me, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "Lily, are you sure? There's no turning back this time." I flipped through the contract, my voice calm. "That's exactly why I'm making sure this ends right." Genesis smirked, pouring more wine, tapping her fingers on the table. "You're going to let them fall into the hole they dug themselves?" I didn't deny it. That night, we rewrote the entire loan agreement. Every clause, airtight, no loopholes. Quietly, Genesis inserted a clause under extended guarantor responsibility, ensuring that if Madison and Brad left the U.S. without settling the debt on time, the responsibility would shift directly to my parents. Genesis pointed to the line, eyes still on me. They'll sign it without reading. I smiled faintly. They've never read a thing I signed. I'm just following their rules. On the day of signing, I treated it like a corporate board meeting. Neatly bound files, bolded clauses. I even invited the bank's lawyer to our home, leaving no room for excuses. Madison flipped through a few pages, wrinkling her nose. Oh my God, Lily, this is so complicated. I trust you. If you sign it, I'll sign it. Brad signed, as if he was authorizing vacation leave. When it was my parents' turn, Genesis quietly slid the pen toward them without a word. Mom frowned. Lily, you always make things so complicated. Your sister will pay, you know. I just smiled politely. Just in case, Mom. And they all signed. None of them paused to read. I collected the documents and stood up. All done. Madison's dream wedding is happening. Madison hugged me tightly, her voice dripping with sugar. You're the best sister ever, Lily. I let her hug me, keeping my face blank. To them, I was still the naive older sister. But they had no idea. I was the one writing the rules now. 3 months after their picture-perfect wedding, reality set in, but not the version Madison and Brad had flaunted. The first loan payment was due on June 15th. I had it circled on my calendar, the bank account ready to track the funds. Instead, I got silence. No transfer, no confirmation message. I triple-checked, then called Madison. Number disconnected. Brad? Same. Everything became clear when I saw Madison's Instagram post. A photo of the two of them lounging at a luxury resort in Bali. The turquoise sea behind them, the caption smug. The world belongs to those who dare to dream big, debt-free life. Cheers to us. I stared at the screen. Dozens of comments praising them. No one knew the truth behind that glossy image. No one but me. Brad and Madison had vanished. No warning. No repayment on the loan I co-signed. No replies to my texts, emails, or calls. I tried reaching out through old friends. All I got was a void. And a cold, smug message from Brad. Relax, Lily. Madison and I will handle it. You just keep doing what you do best, worry. I didn't bother replying. I knew Brad too well. He thought I'd scramble, like always, patching the holes they left. He thought I was still the obedient sheep, afraid to disrupt the family image. But they didn't know. The rules had changed. Genesis showed up at my office one late afternoon, holding 2 coffees, her eyes wary. I guessed it, didn't I? They're gone? I nodded, opened my laptop, and showed her the latest post. It was a story clip of Brad signing a contract to open his company in Dubai, his radiant smile making it seem like he never owed anyone a dime. Genesis raised an eyebrow. You're ready to activate the clause? I smiled slightly, flipping open the folder I had already prepared on the table. I've been waiting for this moment for a long time. Genesis looked at me, silent for a beat. Lily, are you sure you're ready? Your parents are going to lose it when they find out they're now on the hook for the debt. I gently tapped the clause in the contract. Everything was crystal clear, impossible to deny. They always taught me that families should take responsibility together. Stay united. I'm just following exactly what they preached. Genesis let out a sarcastic chuckle. I'm starting to feel sorry for them. I didn't laugh. There wasn't even a shred of pity left in me. 3 days later, I received the first call from the bank. The loan officer's voice was hoarse but professional and firm. Hello, Miss Lily Carter. Your co-signed loan is now officially overdue. As per the loan agreement, we are formally notifying you that repayment responsibility will now transfer to Mr. Albert and Mrs. Vivian Carter. The documents are being finalized and will be delivered to them within the next 24 hours. I sat still, feeling as if a decade-long burden had finally been lifted off my shoulders. Outside the window, the September air was crisp and cool. I threw on a sweater and stepped onto the balcony, watching the faint sunset over the New Haven skyline. My phone stayed silent. No more texts, no more calls begging for help from Madison. Only absolute silence. The calm before the storm. And I knew that storm was closing in fast. I'm not impulsive by nature. I waited a full 10 days after the payment deadline, staying quiet, letting them believe I would once again play the predictable savior. I wanted to be sure Brad and Madison were in too deep to crawl back out. When there was still no sign of payment in the account, I opened my laptop, reviewed every document, double-checked each clause with the bank's legal team. No errors, no loopholes. The extended guarantor clause stood right where it was supposed to, undeniable. I emailed the bank all the proof that Brad and Madison had left the United States without any legitimate repayment plan. One-way flight tickets to Dubai, check-in photos, even the flashy promotional video Brad had plastered all over social media for his new company. Attached was also a copy of the contract bearing my parents' signatures, plain as day. Genesis called me that night, her voice lower than usual. "You really sent it?" I replied simply, "Sent. And the bank has received it." I knew exactly what would happen next. I knew exactly who would call. But I let the phone ring 4 times before picking up. "Lily!" My mother's voice pierced through, shrill and panicked. "Someone from the bank just called. They said we owe nearly $60,000. What the hell is this? What did you do?" I leaned back in my chair, staring at the dim glow of my desk lamp. "Read the contract, Mom. The extended guarantor clause. You and Dad signed it." I heard frantic paper shuffling, pages turning. Then silence. A heavy kind of silence, not from confusion, but from understanding. You? You trapped us?" My mother hissed through the phone. I chuckled softly. "No, Mom. I'm just following the law." Dad took the phone. "Lily, you're tearing this family apart. Madison and Brad are just a little behind, that's all. Do you really have to blow this up like this?" My voice came out steadier than I expected. "They're not behind, Dad. They ran, and I'm done being dragged into their game." Silence stretched on the other end. "Who exactly are you trying to teach a lesson, Lily?" Mom hissed again, her tone losing the usual condescension. I propped my feet up on the desk, gazing at the New Haven skyline at night. "I'm not teaching anyone. I'm just letting everyone learn their own lessons." Her sobs started. Familiar, rehearsed, as if tears alone could make everything reset like before. But this time, I only felt exhaustion. "From now on, you and Dad can deal directly with the bank. I'm out." "You'll regret this, Lily. You'll need us soon enough." I stared at the screen as her name lit up, then shut the phone off without hesitation. The next morning, I received the official notice from the bank. The debt transfer process was complete. My parents were now the legal debtors. Genesis sent me a brief message. "Done. Congratulations." I didn't reply. I didn't need congratulations. That afternoon, I stopped by their house. The 2-story symbol of their so-called American dream was now buried under a pile of foreclosure notices and bank-stamped envelopes scattered across the dining table. My father glared at me with hatred. My mother's face had gone ghostly pale. "We're going to lose the house, Lily. Is that what you wanted? This is the house you grew up in." I stood there, unblinking. "The house you mortgaged twice for Madison without asking me? Don't lecture me about family, Mom, when you've always treated me like an ape." Her tears flowed, but they meant nothing to me now. I paused at the door. "The bank is offering a payment plan. They sent the details to your email." Then I walked away, leaving them to face the price they willingly signed for. Exactly 10 days after the foreclosure notice, I heard the Vermont vacation home, the one I once dreamed would be my peaceful escape, was listed for public sale. The property was listed for a quick sale, priced nearly 1/3 below market value. That house, once an empty promise from my parents, "Lily will inherit it someday," was now reduced to collateral to cover their debts. I wasn't surprised. I wasn't even angry anymore. The exhaustion had lifted from me the day I signed the paperwork transferring full responsibility back to the people who had spent years lecturing me about family obligations. That afternoon, my mother showed up at my office. She hadn't called ahead. The expensive dress she used to flaunt looked disheveled now, and no amount of makeup could hide the dark circles under her eyes. "Lily, you have to help us." Her voice was almost begging, a stark contrast to the arrogant tone I'd always known. I looked up from my laptop, my gaze cold. "I think you dialed the wrong number, Mom." She stepped inside, slamming the door behind her. "Don't do this, Lily. You can say whatever you want, but don't stand by and watch your family lose everything." I set my pen down, arms crossed. "Family? You only call me family when you need me to clean up the mess you and Madison created. You're getting revenge, aren't you?" Her voice trembled. I let out a dry, hollow laugh. "No, Mom, this isn't revenge. This is called consequences. Very different things." She clutched her designer bag tightly, her eyes hollow. They're threatening to seize the house." "That house is your childhood, Lily." I nodded slowly. "My childhood? The house you mortgaged twice without asking me? The house you let Madison and Brad use as their free vacation lodge all summer? That childhood memory?" This time, her tears were real. No more theatrics, no more playing a part. She pulled out her phone, showing me streams of foreclosure warnings from the bank. "Lily, if you help us with this, we'll pay you back, over time. We can rebuild as a family. You know that. You're the smartest one in the family." I didn't even glance at the phone. "Exactly, because I'm the smartest, Mom, I know. This time there will be no later. This time, you and Dad will have to figure it out yourselves." "Hey, but Madison is your sister. She'll pay. She's just struggling." I cut her off, my voice sharp as glass. "Madison isn't struggling. Madison and Brad are partying in Dubai. I check their Instagram accounts daily. Seems like you're the only one still buying their promises." My mother collapsed into the chair. As if for the first time, she realized the world didn't operate the way she'd always believed. She looked at me, eyes red and swollen. "Then what do you want, Lily? You want us thrown out on the streets? You want people to laugh at your parents?" I stood, gathering my files. "No. I want you and Dad, for once in your lives, to feel what it's like to face the consequences of your choices. I want you to feel the exact fear I felt when I scraped together my last penny to pay for Dad's medication, while Madison was posting selfies in Santorini." I turned away, grabbing my bag. "The bank sent you the payment plan instructions. I suggest you actually read them this time." Her sobs behind me had lost all weight. I walked away, leaving them to face the chaos they created. That night, I sat alone in my small apartment, opened my laptop, and stared at the family's financial records I had archived for over a decade. Every dollar I had been forced to pay, every time I had bailed them out, now sat in that folder. I didn't need it anymore. I dragged the entire folder into the trash and hit delete. No more paperwork, no more debts disguised as family favors. No more weak, compliant Lily. Only me, and the hard-earned freedom I bought with my own pain. But I wasn't stopping at letting them feel financial ruin. That would have been too easy for what Madison and Brad had done. I wanted the truth exposed, for them to face justice for that shiny world they clung to so tightly, to finally see them for who they really were. I reopened the insurance folder on my computer, the one where I kept every piece of evidence I had collected over months of silent watching. Emails between Madison and Brad plotting to skip the debt, audio recordings of Brad bragging at a private party about how they were going to outsmart American banks and live large in Dubai, photos of Madison signing the purchase of a luxury beachfront villa while drowning in debt. I had it all meticulously organized. Genesis nodded when I sent her the complete file. "With this kind of evidence, Lily, I guarantee they won't just face a fine. This is organized fraud." I didn't respond. I no longer needed promises. 3 days later, I officially submitted the file to the U.S. Department of Justice and the International Fraud Prevention Division. It took exactly 1 week for me to receive an email confirming the file was valid and had been forwarded to the Special Investigation Team. And then, everything started collapsing faster than I expected. The first news came from Genesis. "Lily, turn on the local finance channel now." I turned on the TV and almost laughed when I saw Brad being escorted out of an investment conference by Dubai police, his face pale, hands cuffed in front of dozens of reporters' cameras. The news spread rapidly across social media. Brad's million-dollar startup was exposed as a front for tax evasion and illegal money transfers. His investor visa was immediately revoked. All his bank accounts in the U.S. were frozen. Madison panicked, posting a story begging for help. "My family is being falsely accused. Someone help me find the best lawyer in Dubai." The comments under her post were flooded with mockery and insults. People relished seeing social media show-offs stripped of their illusions. I didn't comment. I simply sent the article link to my mother via text, along with exactly 3 words. "I warned you." Her only response was an image of the bank's official notice seizing the Vermont vacation home. Everything my family had once been proud of, everything they used to look down on me, was dismantled, brick by brick. 3 days later, federal agents officially contacted me, inviting me to testify as the evidence provider. Genesis went with me to the hearing. She pushed the thick file onto the table, her voice calm. "This is the complete evidence that Madison Carter and Bradley Evans had a plan to evade debt, launder money, and commit international fraud." I stared straight ahead, gripping my cold glass of water. I didn't tremble. They would face criminal charges. I didn't need to do anything more. That night, I received an international call. I didn't need to check the number to know who it was. I picked up, letting Madison sob on the other end. "Lily?" They froze all my accounts. I have nowhere to stay. "I'm being held at the airport. Please, help me." I didn't change my tone. "Did you forget to read Dubai's immigration laws? No money, no valid visa. They'll deport you." "You want me dead, Lily? I'm your sister." I chuckled softly. My sister died the day she chose to lie and abandon the family. The person calling me now is just a criminal looking for rescue. Madison screamed, her voice cracking. "Mom's falling apart, Dad can't sleep. You're destroying this family." "No," I said, cutting her off. "You and our parents did that long ago. I'm just not saving anyone anymore." I hung up and blocked the number. In my email, a notification from the Department of Justice appeared. The Carter-Evans international fraud case has officially moved to the prosecution stage. I clicked to save the notification into my folder, but this time, I didn't feel heavy anymore. The Vermont vacation home was relisted less than a month after the bank foreclosure. My parents had no other options. They were cornered, forced to accept a price far below its actual value, just to salvage the last shred of their so-called dignity. But dignity, to me now, was a luxury no one wanted to buy. I didn't hesitate. I bought that house back. Bought it for a dirt-cheap price at a quiet auction where no one else cared. I didn't buy it for childhood memories, nor for the title of Carter family daughter. I bought it because I could, and because I wanted everything to end the way they deserved. On the day of handover, I went alone. I wanted to see for myself the place that once symbolized oppression, empty promises, and all those times my mother had said, "This house will be yours someday, Lily. But for now, let your sister enjoy it first." Now the house was legally and officially in my name, no one could dispute it. My parents had moved out, leaving behind whatever they couldn't carry. I walked through each room, the late autumn sunlight streaming through the dusty windows. The house looked older than I remembered. Or maybe it was just that my eyes no longer saw it through a nostalgic lens. That afternoon, I received a message from my mother. "Lily, can we come back to the house this weekend? We need to talk. As a family." I didn't reply. That night, my father called. "Lily, you've won already. What else do you want from us? We just want to come back to the house one last time to talk like adults. No one else, just family. I thought about it for a moment, then agreed. But I wasn't going to let them think everything would return to the way it was. The next evening, they showed up right on time. I left the door open, didn't say a word, letting them walk into the house they once believed would forever be theirs. My mother looked around, her eyes watery. "You repainted. It looks much better." I didn't respond. My father pulled out a chair, his voice lowering. "Lily, you did what no one in this family thought you'd dare to do. I admit it, you made everyone pay the price." I crossed my arms, my eyes fixed on them. "I don't care for late confessions, Dad, just say it. What do you want?" My mother bit her lip, her eyes red. "Your father lost his job. We have nowhere to stay. Can you let us stay here for a while?" I let out a soft, hollow laugh. "Stay? In this house where you once kicked me out of the living room because Madison and Brad needed creative space? In the house where you said Lily doesn't need it because I was too dull?" My mother lowered her head, tears falling onto the cold wooden floor. "We were wrong. Can you give us a chance? As family?" I stood up, opened the door. "Family? You only say that word when you need someone to save you. I'm not saving anyone anymore. This is my house. I live here, quietly, alone. And I won't let anyone cross this door again." My father opened his mouth to say something, but I raised my hand to stop him. "If you still have any pride left, figure things out yourselves, like I've done for the past 10 years. If not, that's your choice." I stepped onto the porch, turning my back on them. "The exit is in the back. Don't make me say it again." I didn't look back as I heard their heavy footsteps leaving the house. That night, I stood on the balcony, a glass of red wine in hand, watching the Vermont mountains fade under the cold moonlight. I didn't feel triumphant, nor satisfied. It was simply the feeling of someone finally sitting where they belonged, on the very land I had once been forced to give up. This house was now mine, no conditions, no debts, no imposed memories, just a quiet, clean home where I could close the door on the past. And for the first time in all those years, I realized I felt empty. But it was a peaceful emptiness. I couldn't even remember the last time Madison called me. Maybe it was the day she was deported from Dubai, or when her last bank account was frozen. The messages, emails, desperate calls afterward just quietly flowed into the blocked list. I didn't need to listen anymore. There was nothing new in those pleas, just the same tired chorus. "We're family." Family. A word I had been forced to believe for almost 40 years meant unconditional sacrifice. Now I understood that, to them, it was just a free pass to escape every consequence they created themselves. I was no longer Lily Carter, the obedient daughter of Albert and Vivian Carter. I was Lily, a free woman, living in her own house, making decisions entirely her own. The house in Vermont had been completely renovated by me. The old family photos had been taken down, the objects stuffed with stale memories boxed up and sold. I kept only what I chose to keep. Nothing remained that I hadn't decided deserved to exist in my space. The Genesis still stopped by on weekends, bringing wine and her sly smile. "So, how does it feel, Lily? Owning the house, the life, and the silence?" I smiled, pouring her another glass of wine. "Lighter than I thought. Turns out, letting go of the people who drained me is easier than I ever imagined." Genesis leaned back in her chair, looking out at the woods behind the house. "Sometimes, the best revenge is through legal contracts. Cold, legitimate, no need to shout." I nodded. I didn't need anyone to know what I had done. I didn't need the world to applaud. I didn't need Madison, Brad, or even my parents to beg for forgiveness, to feel like I'd won. I wasn't trying to win against anyone. I just wanted peace. Madison still posted blaming messages, saying I was cruel, that I'd destroyed her family. I didn't care. Everyone has their story to tell, and I didn't need to explain mine. My parents moved into a small rental apartment in the suburbs. Genesis told me that. But I didn't check, didn't ask, didn't give them a chance to enter my life again. One winter night, with snow covering the porch, I sat by the fireplace, holding a mug of hot cocoa, listening to the wind whistle through the windows. My phone stayed silent. No calls, no debt notices, no desperate texts. I couldn't even remember the last time I had to check my account balance. Everything I owned now was in my name. No shared owners, no shared debts. The years that once drained my tears, that once forced me to grit my teeth and sign check after check for Madison, for the family, for dreams that were never mine, were now nothing more than faded memories. I remembered those quiet nights, sitting by my father's hospital bed, in that cold operating room, while Madison flaunted selfies from Italy with captions like, "Life is meant to be enjoyed." The words my mother used to hurl at me like knives, the time she turned me into a walking ATM, had also become fragments of a sad dream I no longer cared to hold on to. I didn't wish for their apologies, nor did I need them to understand. What I needed was simply for them to disappear from my life, the same way I had slammed shut the door on the past once and for all. Some endings don't need loud revenge or dramatic declarations. Sometimes it's just silence. It's the deed to the house in my name, the clean bank accounts no one else can touch. The sound of the cold wind sweeping through the porch on a quiet night, where I sat alone but no longer lonely. I didn't know yet what I would do next, but at least I knew I would never again be someone's shadow, nor the familiar name on the list of people they called when they hit rock bottom. I had closed everything, not with tears, not with words, but with contracts, with signatures, with absolute clarity. And that was true freedom. From Lily's story, I realized that freedom doesn't come from loud revenge or waiting for remorse from those who hurt you. True freedom is having the courage to firmly close the door on the past, to set clear boundaries, and to live your life the way you choose. No one has the right to turn you into a walking wallet, and no one gets to define your worth through sacrifice. In the end, calm clarity and silent resolve are the sharpest weapons to reclaim your own life. What do you think about how Lily faced and closed the chapter of her painful past? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more real-life family stories that are both captivating and meaningful.